What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and if you're enjoying the content here on my channel, then make sure you hit the like button and make sure you hit subscribe so you can help decide what direction the content on my channel goes in the foreseeable future. Okay, so after completing our video on the origin of Guild Hulk, a lot of you guys really seem to be interested in that whole thing. I thought we were kind of done with Incredible Hulk stuff, but I guess not. I guess it's always just more Hulk, more Hulk. But this is the origin of Infernal Hulk. This is actually kind of a cool story because this is a story called Identity Wars. And Identity Wars was like this 3-part limited series that featured Spider-Man, Deadpool, and the Incredible Hulk. Now, originally I was just gonna do the Incredible Hulk portion, but it's a continual story. It's not one of these, 3-issue one-shots or anything along those lines. And so what this really does is it initially picks up with just like Spider-Man and Deadpool and the Incredible Hulk. And they're all kind of thrust into the same location. And the reason why is because of the fact that Spider-Man, again, is at this point in his life where he's part of Horizon Labs. Remember, we talked about that in our videos, our run on The Amazing Spider-Man before All New, All Different Marvel, that eventually he was inducted as part of Horizon Labs, which is just this think tank for people who are extremely smart and they put their intelligence to task for just making things that make the world a better place. But Horizon Labs had also been a place that was targeted by a handful of criminals, and they'd actually hired Deadpool for the purpose of breaking in and basically accessing other dimensions. And the reason why is because of the fact that within Horizon Labs was just this massive portal, this massive bridge to other universes. Now, the idea behind this is that it was just something that people at Horizon Labs were working on. It doesn't really seem like it had a purpose or it was supposed to serve any unique purpose. We know that it does just because of the fact of the things that go on and what we saw in our Spider-Man story, that it basically allowed people to jump in and out of dimensions and different things along those lines. But the fact remains here that Deadpool being hired was just for the purpose of jumping from one reality to the next in order to find like gold and precious jewels. That was it. And it's actually not a bad criminal scheme to like jump through other dimensions and then steal stuff and then jump back because they'd never find you. Like you would just disappear into the multiverse, and it's not a bad idea. One of the funny things that Deadpool references is New Mutants issue number 98, which would be certified 9.8. That's the best you can have when it comes to a comic. And Comic Historian actually has that. I saw him get it signed by Rob Liefeld. I was so jealous. But it's kind of one of the funny things. New Mutants number 98, for those of you guys who don't know, that was the first appearance of Deadpool in Marvel Comics. So it's a fun little Easter egg. But in the middle of all this, what we end up finding out is that Bruce Banner had been contracted by Horizon Labs to work on a small side project. So he ended up being caught by one of these criminals when he was snooping around trying to figure out what was going on. And so we basically end up having Spider-Man, Deadpool, and the Incredible Hulk all kind of thrown in one location. Now, what is going on is in the middle of this giant fight when the Hulk manifests and starts tearing things up, it ultimately results in this portal activating and them basically being yanked through. But the cool thing about this is that they're sort of dispersed. They're sort of split into different locations and they all end up going about their own business. And we actually just end up running into what's called the Amazing Spider. Now, one of the things to keep in mind when it comes to Spider-Man as a character, and it's really like this for the most popular characters, their different iterations are usually explored pretty well by different writers just because of the fact that fans, at least as far as I'm aware from my own perspective and stories that I've seen, fans like seeing alternate reality takes on characters because it gives them a break away from what they've been reading so far. But the cool thing about this is that we end up having this version of Spider-Man, this alternate reality version of Peter Parker, seems to more or less be kind of ill. Now, we will find out there's a little more going on with him than what initially meets the eye. The whole concept behind him is actually derived from the Inheritors, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But in the face of the fact that this alternate reality version of Peter Parker is more or less sick, that the main Marvel Peter Parker takes up his stead. But the cool thing about this is that there are no other superheroes in this universe. All the superheroes have basically left and retired and more or less walked away. And the first inclination of this comes from the main Marvel Universe Peter Parker facing off against this alternate reality version of the Rhino. And when Peter shows up, the Rhino just kind of gives up. He just sort of walks away and he's like, look, I mean, I'm not facing you. I mean, you're the guy who took down Galactus. And that's when things get kind of crazy because we jump back to the main universe Peter Parker speaking with this alternate reality counterpart, only for us to find out that with all the other superheroes having retired, it was because of the Amazing Spider. Something happened somewhere along the line that this alternate reality version of Peter Parker became insanely powerful, and the result was that he effectively just kind of rendered all other superheroes being completely obsolete. Now, with the main universe Peter Parker basically exploring this landscape, he ends up finding out that his Uncle Ben is very much alive. But the downside to this is that Uncle Ben is pretty cruel. Now, this is one of the crazy things because when it comes to Peter's character, I mean, and this is really kind of common knowledge, but historically, Uncle Ben served serve the purpose of Peter becoming the Spider-Man that we all know, but it was by virtue of his death that happened. And so we haven't really seen a whole lot of alternate reality stories where Uncle Ben lived. It's really been one of those things that Marvel kind of stays hands off. Marvel's like, look, you know, Uncle Ben died. It's the basis behind Peter Parker becoming Peter Parker. We've seen alternate reality stories where like Aunt May dies instead of Uncle Ben. But for the most part, you know, Uncle Ben's one of those characters where he died and he stayed dead. Not only that, this version of Uncle Ben is extremely cynical and he's actually a bad guy. And the way that we learn this is because of the fact that the main Marvel Peter Parker is drinking his tea. Uncle Ben basically makes the statement that this alternate reality Peter Parker filled in this alternate reality Uncle Ben on what was going on. And so what we end up learning is that this alternate Peter has basically been using the portal to bring other Spider-Men to his universe and then sapping their life energies, killing them off, and absorbing their power in the process. And so that's one of the reasons why the superheroes in this alternate reality retired, because this alternate version of Peter basically made himself insanely powerful. He was wildly strong, he was fast, he was capable of legitimately beating people like Galactus and so on and so forth. And so because of that, it creates a pretty interesting scenario, because now we end up having the main Marvel Universe Peter Parker discovering that this alternate reality version of Uncle Ben is a bad guy. Not only that, this alternate reality Peter is not really a villain. He's trying to do the right thing and he's trying to be legitimate. So again, it's kind of a funny scenario just because of the fact that when Uncle Ben goes to attack the main Peter Parker, Peter basically kind of dodges out of the way, and the result is that this alternate reality version of Peter's ends up being killed instead. And so again, it's really kind of a weird moment and it's kind of strange the way it unfolds. But the fact remains, what we end up doing is we end up picking up with Deadpool's part of the story. And again, this is kind of cool because Deadpool comes across this alternate reality counterpart named Death Wish, and it pretty much unfolds exactly as you would expect. They just kind of goof off. There's one point where they go to an aquarium and Deadpool gets his leg bit off and they're just kind of like, yeah, man. And they're just having like amazing fun. It looks like the most fun that I've ever had in my life. Now, what we end up learning is that this version of Deadpool is not who we would expect it to be. We actually end up finding out this alternate reality version is not Wade Wilson. But before we can get an answer, they're effectively attacked by Dr. Doom, who's going by the name Death Mask. And so again, it creates kind of this wild scenario. It's actually pretty fun here because this guy very much speaks like Dr. Doom. That's one of the things people love most about his character. One of the things that I've always loved about the character of Dr. Doom is that he refers to himself in the third person, his cockiness, his hubris. But of course, in the middle of all this, he basically incinerates Death Wish in his entirety, calling him a failure. And again, what this does is it establishes that there were things going on both sides. The Death Mask was using Death Wish for the purpose of accessing this teleporter. And so again, it's basically a mirror version of all the events that had happened in the main Marvel Universe in terms of the events surrounding this teleporter and so on and so forth. But in terms of Infernal Hulk, essentially the reason why you're here, what we end up finding out is that in this universe, Bruce Banner and the Incredible Hulk are two distinctly different individuals. The basis behind this discovery actually comes from the main Marvel Universe Peter Parker combing through the files of this alternate Peter Parker and basically finding out again the reason why all the superheroes had left and so on and so forth. But the idea that in this universe, Bruce Banner became the Sorcerer Supreme. He was basically brought under the wing of Doctor Strange and trained to be the new Sorcerer Supreme. And so the result is that he had basically banished the Incredible Hulk from his body and effectively sent him to hell. Of course, with Deadpool going about his adventures and, Deadpool's stories being as nonsensical as they ever were, what we find out is that this guy Death Mask is actually this universe's version of Wade Wilson. That essentially what had happened is that he had suffered from cancer in the same way the main Marvel Universe Deadpool had. The difference here is that Reed Richards actually performed surgery that cured him of his cancer. Because of this, with him being cured, he basically became super intelligent and then fancied himself a criminal, built an empire. This combined with the Amazing Spider going through, stealing the power of Spider-Man, basically meant that the various superheroes retired and Death Mask had the opportunity to build up this massive empire for himself. And so, of course, the result is that Wade Wilson throws like a bomb at him or something along those lines. They fight for a little bit, and this alternate reality version of Deadpool is effectively killed off. I mean, he's more or less eliminated. And so what we end up doing is we have, Death Mask basically going to hell and then beseeching Mephisto. Now, for those of you guys who are new to Marvel Comics, Mephisto is a cosmic entity, but he's basically Satan in the realm of Marvel Comics. There is an actual devil in Marvel. This is one of the big differences between Marvel and DC. DC takes a very heavy-handed approach when it comes to like the Judeo-Christian themes. You find all that stuff in Vertigo. With Marvel, it's not that way. It's really more of the idea that different cosmic entities represent aspects of the universe. All that really stems back to the idea of the Stan Lee, Jack Kirby era, not really wanting to involve Christian themes and instead looking at comics as a kind of escape from reality, something to kind of goof off about. But again, with this idea of the Incredible Hulk, with the Infernal Hulk, essentially what had happened here is that with this alternate reality version of Bruce Banner banishing the Incredible Hulk persona from himself, it was essentially sent to hell. Now, when it initially went to hell, the Hulk was very much as we imagined him. He was just green and he was large and so on and so forth, but he was basically corrupted by Mephisto himself. Now, whether that was through magic or sorcery or what have you is not really explained. Instead, what ends up happening here is that these versions of Banner and the Hulk basically switch. And so what ended up happening is when the main Marvel Universe Bruce Banner arrived in this alternate reality, because this alternate version of Bruce Banner had basically cast a spell across the universe that banished the Incredible Hulk from him, when the main Marvel Universe Bruce Banner showed up, the Incredible Hulk and Banner split. And so it was basically a scenario where as soon as Banner arrived, the Incredible Hulk persona immediately went to hell. And so it allowed Infernal Hulk to switch places with the Incredible Hulk. And the result is that the Infernal Hulk is on Earth and the Incredible Hulk is in hell. So hopefully your brain's nice and mush by now after that little explanation. I don't know any other way to explain that. But what really follows here is just kind of this conflict of sorts, in the sense that Infernal Hulk is basically imbued with the power of hell, the magics of Mephisto, combined with his already incredible and incalculable strength. And that's one of the crazy scenarios when it comes to the Hulk. And if you go through and start reading different stories by Marvel Comics, for the most part, they don't really modify the Incredible Hulk, because if they did, he would be insanely OP, like, you know, exactly what you're seeing right here. In this particular instance, with him being bonded to the various forms and the various magics of Mephisto that basically give him heightened invulnerability and a heightened level of strength, it basically means that he's essentially unstoppable. And so basically it's this plan of the Sorcerer Supreme, Bruce Banner, combined with the efforts of Spider-Man as well as Deadpool to try to find a way to pull this out. Now again, this ultimately leads to Deadpool being made to look like Bruce Banner to serve as a distraction, while the actual, you know, Sorcerer Supreme, Banner, and Spider-Man try to figure things out. But essentially what happens here is the Incredible Hulk persona is effectively retrieved from hell, basically brought to face off against his alternate reality counterpart, Infernal Hulk. And so having this Incredible Hulk versus the Infernal Hulk concept, these two beings battling one another, it sets things in motion pretty easily. Now, of course, with the power of the Incredible Hulk alongside the power of Doctor Strange, it basically allows, you know, the Incredible Hulk to overcome Infernal Hulk pretty readily. But again, that's something that we wouldn't normally see, because with the Infernal Hulk, I mean, you got to remember, he's got the powers of mysticism and magic, and the Incredible Hulk's still pretty strong, but at the end of the day, it's really just kind of forcing Infernal Hulk back into the body of the Doctor Strange version of himself. And so the result is that when that happens, they effectively snap the neck of Sorcerer Supreme Bruce Banner, killing his physical body and destroying his ability to turn back into the Incredible Hulk. And so again, it's kind of an interesting scenario, because the Infernal Hulk is just kind of stuck inside of a dead body. Now, one of the things that Marvel doesn't really explain here is exactly how that works. There have been alternate reality stories where they've dealt with that. In this one, they don't. And so in order to provide an explanation, we kind of have to look at some alternate reality stories. I mean, for the most part, whenever there was an instance where Bruce Banner tried to like take his own life, or somebody tried to kill Bruce Banner, the Incredible Hulk persona would pop up and ultimately save the life of Banner, whether Banner wanted to live or not. The only exception that I can think of is the Incredible Hulk: The End. And in that story, Bruce Banner had basically grown into an old man following a nuclear holocaust, and the Incredible Hulk being the sole survivor on Earth. And the Bruce Banner persona basically had a heart attack, allowing the mind of Bruce Banner to die and the Incredible Hulk to just kind of live on. But that's the opposite of what happened here. And so the question is, would the Incredible Hulk manifest and basically live? You know, those are things that we're not given an answer to. Instead, we just kind of have to take it for what it's worth. And so ultimately what ends up happening here is we basically find out that following the death of Sorcerer Supreme Bruce Banner, his mind, more or less, or his essence or soul or what have you, had left his physical body and transitioned to hell for a moment. And in doing so, basically freed the body of, you know, this alternate reality Peter Parker that was killing all the alternate universe versions of himself and absorbing their power, and then brings him back to Earth, whereby he undertakes the mantle of a Ghost Rider, which is kind of cool, because now he's a spirit of vengeance, you know, destined to basically grab the spirits of bad guys and take them back to hell, and, you know, that kind of a thing. But again, you know, the story ends pretty quickly. You know, the portal's basically reconstructed by this alternate reality version of Peter Parker as a last gift, you know, as trying to make amends for his past actions, and it allows Deadpool, Spider-Man, and the Incredible Hulk to basically, you know, travel back to Earth. But again, not a great big huge explanation explanation video, not a whole lot to go into in terms of, you know, character concepts and anything. It's just kind of a fun little story, kind of a fun little three-part origin, which I thought was sort of cool. If you guys are interested in this, it's actually The Amazing Spider-Man number 38, Deadpool annual number 1, I think it is, from 2011, and then the Incredible Hulk's annual number 1. But it's actually a pretty cool story, pretty great little tidbit of an adventure, essentially. But that's basically the life, the origin and death of Infernal Hulk. Pretty cool little story. But anyway, guys, if you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you guys drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.